Happy Monday, and in this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, Leif, Thulin, and I, we're going to share our thoughts on the difficulties in scouting prospects in the SEC. The SEC is absolutely brutal, probably the strongest conference in the history of college basketball, which can make it very difficult to evaluate some of the top prospects in the 2025 NBA draft. Stay tuned. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I am your host, Rafael Barlowe, along with my co-host, the man that watches more college basketball and tennis than anyone else, Leif Thulin. And I want to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Please check out the Locked On newsletter because your favorite Locked On NBA podcast has a newsletter. You can check it out at lockedondaily.com. It is your one-stop shop for ultimate team and league coverage. And if you are not subscribed to the Locked On NBA Big Board YouTube channel, please subscribe, like, share, comment, click the bell so you can be notified every time we drop an episode because we are your daily source for NBA draft content. All right, let's get right into this episode. Like, I know you probably watched a ton of basketball. To me, it was a great weekend of college basketball. Like, what games stood out to you? What were some of like the performances that really caught your attention?
I'll tell you what, my sleep schedule is all sorts of messed up right now. I think I watched 9 games of college basketball on Saturday consecutively. And then I went and watched the Australian Open until like 4 a.m. And then in between that, I did a new podcast on Locked On College Basketball. So my weekend was great, but very, very busy with stuff I enjoy watching and scouting. The SEC takes the forefront, and it was none of those matchups on paper stand out as wow. Like Alabama played Texas A&M. That's a top 10 matchup, but Texas A&M was missing one of their best players. And you watch those games, and they all end up being great games, and it speaks to the depth of the SEC. And as it relates to scouting, it's really difficult because there's going to be bad games for stars. Like Jeremiah Feara has had a welcome to the SEC 3-game stretch. He's excellent. I have him ranked in my top 6, but he's had a welcome to the SEC. Tre Johnson had one awesome game and one not so awesome game in 2 of his latest SEC games.
2 struggle games.
And that's the thing is you're going to play these teams that can physically outmatch you because they're 4 years older. And it's like you're in 8th grade and you're playing against the varsity team. And, I think there's less credence given to that because, you want the potential. If they're good enough to be top 10 picks, then they can dominate. And he did. He scored 26 against Tennessee's vaunted defense, speaking of Tre Johnson. But I want to make clear that its consistency is going to be very, very difficult to evaluate for all these prospects. Because you're going to have great games here and there, and they're going to have scouts salivating. And then you're going to have those games where scouts can be critical because you're a no-show in a big game. And you're saying, well, if they're not showing up in this game, then how are they going to show up in the NBA? And I think the SEC and how good they are as a whole conference. And like South Carolina almost beat Auburn. That was the best team, number 1 in the country, nearly lost to the last ranked team in KenPom of the SEC as of entering SEC play. Like that speaks to the depth of the league. You're going to see a lot of bad performances that are going to get nitpicked. And I think it's the players that emerge through the tumultuous games, the games that are strugglesome, the ones that they can pass by and have more good games than bad in the SEC, and particularly road games in the SEC. I think that'll be very important for passing a litmus test for adversity for drafting those type of players in the top 10. Speaking of Tre Johnson, Jeremiah Feara, and maybe even Asa Newell as top 10 guys from the SEC.
Yeah, I want to talk about Tre Johnson. So you talk about having a rude introduction to SEC play. His first game against A&M, Texas lost by 20, 80-60. He was 2 of 13 from the floor, 0 of 5 from 3, finished with 11 points. He was 7 of 7 from the foul line. If there is a silver lining in that game, is that he got to the foul line 7 times per game, which is almost double or more than double than his normal free throw rate. His next game, 3 days later against number 1 Auburn, They only lose by 5, but he's 5 of 13 from the floor. He misses all 3 of his 3-point attempts, only gets to the foul line twice. So over that 2-game stretch, he averaged 11 points per game, and he was 7 of 26 from the floor, and he missed all 8 of his attempts from 3. All right, so you're probably thinking like, all right, I'm a little down on him. If you aren't like a Tre Johnson fan, then these 2 games kind of highlight your concerns about him, his heavy diet of difficult shots and so on. So what does he do against Tennessee, who just got smacked by like 30 points? You know Tennessee was going to come out hungry. He comes out, he scores 26 points, 11 of 17 from the floor, 4 of 8 from 3, and he displays the tough shot making. I mean, it was a very difficult amount of shots that he was making, but he shows the high level shot making that makes him such an intriguing prospect en route to 26 points. And to me, that is basically what we've seen in a nutshell from not only Tre Johnson, from multiple prospects. Collin Murray-Boyles had the game against Auburn, which was highlighted on my calendar because I wanted to see Collin Murray-Boyles and Johni Broome. Broome coming into this weekend, I thought was the college basketball player of the year. Collin Murray-Boyles, a player that I haven't been as high on as the consensus. I actually had him out of my first round, which, I've seen a mock today that had him at number 4, and I'm not here to criticize anybody's mocks, but it just shows you that, we're just on totally different pages, and this class is, I think, very unique in a sense. But Murray-Boyles is a guy that I hadn't had in my first round. I don't have any concerns about him on the college level. It's more so how his game translates. And then he had a couple games. I was like, okay, well, you know what? Maybe he's not as good as I thought. And against Mississippi State, he was 2 of 9 from the floor, 5 points. Against Alabama, South Carolina lost by 20. He was 1 of 6 from the floor, finished with 6 points. I'm like, all right. It kind of felt like, all right, I'm justified in the fact that I don't see him as a first-round pick. He scores 11 total points in 2 games. And he's a sophomore. I know he's the same age as some freshmen, but that's not first-round production from a guy that I thought was going to have to dominate. So what does he do? Auburn, 25 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, 10 of 18 from the floor, 5 of 7 from the line. And I want to hear your opinion on this, but I thought he absolutely kicked Johni Broome's butt in the first half.
I don't love him projecting forward to the NBA. College game, I love the way he can burrow into the post, take advantage of smaller defenders, use speed and quickness to beat bigger guys. Like, he's a matchup nightmare. And this is going to sound weird, but he kind of reminds me of Bonzie Colson in that way of college basketball. Okay. Like, at Notre Dame, gave the work to Marvin Bagley and Wendell Carter. But you didn't see him in the NBA because he was a 6'6" center. And he had long arms, and they'd always talk about, he rebounds out of his area, gets boards, and he uses his body to burrow his way to the hoop and overpower smaller guys, and he's too quick for bigs. And that's how I feel about Collin Murray-Boyles. I think he's a little bit more well-suited for the NBA than Bonzie Colson was, but I don't see this can't-miss prospect that is floating around the top 10, the lottery for many people. I'm with you that I think there's productivity. There's places in which maybe it's possible. We've seen guys like this. Maybe David Roddy is a similar one in a sense, but Roddy, once again, had to repurpose his game. Yeah. Like, he has to be a catch and shoot guy, and he was better shooter in college already than what Collin Murray-Boyles is right now. Boyles is a more dominant athlete on the interior than Roddy, but I just don't love this archetype, and maybe I'll get bitten in the butt, but he's a really good college player, and I think he can make the NBA. I just don't see this can't-miss first-round pick.
What were your thoughts on that performance? Like, to me, like I said, I thought he absolutely dominated Broome in the first half. First possession of the game for South Carolina, blows by Broome going left. He beat him on seals there. There was a play that he had an impressive combination of ball handling moves. He hit him with a right to left between the legs. Then it was a left to right crossover, drove baseline. Broome cut off the baseline. He spins middle, left hand touch finish around the rim. The way that he outplayed him in the first half was, to me, it was very impressive because it was off the dribble, whether it's on the left side, the right side. He physicaled him in a sense. I don't even know if that's a word. He sealed him out the paint. I mean, he looks phenomenal in the first half. I mean, he finished with 25 points. I want to say maybe 16 were in the first half, and then Broome ended up, I think, at the 13-minute mark, leaving the game with like a sprained ankle or a serious ankle injury, as they're saying. But Collin Murray-Boyles looked phenomenal. But this is coming off the heels of 2 games where he scored a combined 11 points. And I just think that is what we're going to get a lot of in the SEC this year because the schedule is so brutal. You could end up facing 3 top 10 teams in a matter of 7 days. How do we evaluate that?
Well, here's the question. Do you take Johni Broome outplaying the National Player of the Year before ankle injury and all that over consecutive bad performances? Is it enough to go 1 of 3, or would you prefer 2 of 3, but without the highlight of out-dueling and actually dominating the head-to-head performance against the guy who is an All-American National Player of the Year frontrunner? And I think what I'll end up doing is probably, especially for the guys that are the stars of their team, like Tre Johnson, Jeremiah Feara, Collin Murray-Boyles. It's a little different for a guy like Derrion Reid, who I think flashes are very important. I'll go for the substance and say if he goes, they go through 20 games of SEC play and he gives me 14 good ones, that matters a ton. Whereas if, you have 5 great ones, 5 good ones, and 10 bad ones, I'm a little more concerned because, hey, if they know your scouting report, that's probably why that you had 10 bad games. And that means you're solvable and there's not as much malleability to find a role in the professional ranks because all these guys, there's so few that can just transition and be a star at every level. There's guys that are stars in the collegiate ranks like Buddy Hield that now are a specialist as a shooter. And I think malleability in changing the roles means that you can't be game planned out of the games when you're the star of these guys. So I'll be watching with a keen eye as the SEC play unwraps, and I think consistency is going to be more important than it has been in my previous year scouting reports.
Yeah. Up next, we're going to talk about a few freshman guards that at least I personally think are first-round picks. I want to get Leif's opinion on how to evaluate Jeremiah Feara and Labaron Philon and also Boogie Fland. I want to take a moment to introduce you to a brand new mobile game that I am really excited about. It is called the Ultimate College Basketball HC. If you have ever dreamed of being a college basketball coach, this is your chance to step into those shoes. In the Ultimate College Basketball HC, you control every single detail of your program, from recruiting players to hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps to handling NIL deals and also managing scholarships. It is all in your hands. And when it comes to game time, you get to draw up the offensive plays, you get to set your strategy, and the way you play just won't affect the current season. It will shape the future of your program. It's a game that lets you feel the full weight of what it means to be a head coach and lead your team to glory. And here is a special offer for Locked On NBA Big Board listeners. If you use the promo code Locked On CBB, all caps, that is Locked On CBB, you can get a free boost inside the game for your program. It is the perfect way to kickstart your coaching career. Download the Ultimate College Basketball HC. Just visit ultimate-cbb.com or look it up in the app stores. Again, Ultimate College Basketball HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. Next, let's talk about the Game Time app because I love going to events, especially sporting events. But the Game Time app has more than just sporting events. There's music, there's comedy, there's theaters and plays and more. And one of my favorite memories on the Game Time app was going to the Terrence Crawford Errol Spence fight in Las Vegas. I got my tickets on the Game Time app, and that was an absolute unforgettable experience simply because I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, where Terrence Crawford is from, and I live in Dallas, where Errol Spence is from. So it was just an awesome experience, and I got my ticket on Game Time. And now the Game Time app has made it even easier to get tickets to your favorite events with their new feature called Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff, and it will only show you the best deals on great seats, so you do not have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. So you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Use the redeem code LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. All right, second segment, we talked about Tre Johnson. We talked about Collin Murray-Boyles. Now I want to switch to the freshmen. There are a few freshman point guards, at least guards, combo guards, however you see it, in this crop of SEC players that, at least for me, I have them as a first-round grade. But the question I'm asking myself is, will I have a first-round grade for them or a lottery grade for them after they go through this gauntlet of the SEC schedule? I currently have Jeremiah Feara as a top 10 pick. He had a phenomenal non-conference schedule, big games against Arizona. He had the big game against Michigan where he hit the game winner. And then SEC play has been absolutely brutal for him. He had a game, I want to say it was against Alabama, where he missed like his first 8 shots. Yeah. And even though he finished with a, respectable stat line, I mean, he struggled in SEC play. I think he's at about like 36% from the floor and 17% from 3. He was 1 of 11 for only 2 points against Georgia. He was 4 of 8 in only 21 minutes. Solid game against Texas A&M, but he was 5 of 15 versus Alabama. Do you think, and I know you said that you have him, I think you said at number 6?
Yep, number 6 for me.
Do you think he can maintain that position with this brutal schedule? I mean, they have Texas up next. I mean, you really don't get a break. I mean, you may have a couple pockets here and there, but I mean, it's brutal.
I think he's got to do the unteachable things he has more so than some of these other guys, because Oklahoma's a paper tiger as a team. Like, they were undefeated for a while. They're one of the 3 longest undefeated teams in the nation, but you knew that they were unlike the other 2. Like Florida and Tennessee, significantly better basketball teams than Oklahoma. Oklahoma did this last year too, where they started undefeated for a while and then ran into a buzzsaw. So I don't think they're a bad team, but I do think Jeremiah Feara elevated them to a stature that they could not maintain. And so it almost hurts him that his excellence, the big moment against Michigan, is going to be like, hey, where's that guy, when he's playing teams that are better and that are more prepared for what Oklahoma has to throw at them. So I expected him to regress. There was no way he could keep up that consistency. And there was no way that the help from Moore and some of the other guys on his team would hold up through the course of SEC play against better athletes. That said, Jeremiah Feara does things you can't teach. He's quick to the rack. He's long. He is able to hit shots from all 3 areas of the court. You hit mid-range jump shots, which I know are going out of style, but like, you can't guard certain areas of his game because he has a counter to what you're trying to take away. He steps behind the 3, hits a game-winning 3, gets to the rack, gets to the free throw line. I just want to see consistent aggression and growth throughout the year from him. And I don't love talking about age, but in the context this is a reclassified freshman playing against older guys in the best conference in basketball, with a conference that should get 12 teams in. I think they'll get 11, but I think they should get 12. And like I mentioned, the team that entered the SEC play lowest ranked on KenPom, South Carolina, just nearly beat the number 1 team in the nation. So there's going to be tons of competition. And if he can shine against this level, I have no doubt that he'll end up being a lottery pick.
Like, for example, they have Texas next. I know in football that's a huge rivalry. Let's say he has a game where he struggles against Texas. Does that change anything for you?
I mean, I think it's not as good as if he played well, but I don't think it changes too much. I saw in Jeremiah Fears's preseason just too much ability to do things that I covet at the NBA level. Put pressure on the rim, see players on your team, live dribble passing, knock down shots from different areas of the court. And he's doing it all so in such an advanced fashion at such a young age. I'm pretty sold he's going to be in my top 10. Like, it would have to be disastrous for me to move him. I really like what I see from Jeremiah Feara. And James and I actually tweeted a long time ago, if you guys want to find this, about Feara being top 10 prior to his kind of breaking out party against Michigan, prior to even the game before that. Just like, hey, this guy's really good. Like, take a gander at him. And he was about 11 on my board when that happened. And I think the game before Michigan, I was thinking, okay, I might see him ahead of Nolan Troyer right now. Like, there's just things that I see because I see college basketball so much more frequently than I do when I go out and watch Traore and a bunch. But I just started to see things I can't unsee. And so I think he's the guy I've got to ride or die with. And so I'm riding with my guy, Jeremiah Feara.
Yeah, James had him as a top 10 pick. I want to say as early as like the first week in December. I want to say it was like December 4th or something like that. It seemed pretty outlandish at the time, but it's it's you've seen other people kind of follow suit with him. Let's talk about Labaron Philon. Definitely has a much different role than the players that we've discussed, from Tre Johnson to Collin Murray-Boyles and Jeremiah Feara. For those guys, their team goes how they go. Even if they go, the team still may struggle because Tre Johnson is, the top dog at Texas. Collin Murray-Boyles is their go-to guy, South Carolina, and same with Jeremiah Feara. Philon has the luxury of, if he has a great game, good. If he's off, it still may not have an impact on whether Alabama wins. So far, the SEC, he's been like the players that we've mentioned. He's had 2 games under double figures, and then he had a really good game against Oklahoma where he had 16 points, dished out 5 assists. Then against South Carolina, he had 8 points. Against Texas A&M, he struggled, only 3 of 10 from the floor, but had 8 points and 7 assists. So far, I think he's been good with his play. I mean, obviously there's 2 games under 10, 1 game with 16 points, but he's only turned the ball over 1 time in the 3 games. And out of those 3 games, he has 13 assists to 1 turnover. You'll take that from a freshman guard. I like Philon. To me, he's a first-round pick. I think he may have an opportunity to come out looking the best out of all the freshmen in this conference because he doesn't have the same role. What are your thoughts on Philon, and if you agree with that assessment?
See, I think he could if he shoots well, but the thing is, he gets great looks because he's got other teammates and they don't need him. Like, you could take Labaron Philon off of the Alabama Crimson Tide and they're still a top 5 team. And that's not saying anything about him. It's just they're ridiculously deep. So he gets great looks, but he's shooting 28% from 3. And I think the reason for that is he's playing out of position. Like, I think at the next level, you want him to be a point guard.
Definitely.
And so now that's where the projection is happening. And of course, that's what all of scouting is. But I mean, he's scoring 12 a game and he's shooting 28%. So he's still being productive. But the reason I hesitate to say he looks the best coming out of SEC play while playing a role is because Alabama desperately needs a consistent shooter. If he does that, his stock will soar because you're gonna look at what he does and you say, wow, this guy's lightning fast, puts pressure on the rim, has decent size for a guard, young, and now you're going to play him at his best position, and now he's shooting an SEC play, let's just say 35 to 40%. Then I think he's a lottery pick. But however, if he continues to shoot 25% with the excellent looks, like the shot quality is off the charts for Alabama. They just don't shoot it well. I think you have question of, like, how good of a point guard is he? Because he didn't play point guard due to Mark Sears. How well can he shoot? Oh, we have that answer because he can't shoot catch and shoot if that were to occur. So I think he is positioned to have that chance, but he's got a very clear-cut make or break swing skill.
Yeah, let's talk about his teammate real fast, Derrion Reid. I've had some scouts tell me they like him a lot. They have a first-round grade on him, not because of where he's at today, just because of the positional versatility. They think that he can defend 3s and 4s, and they believe that he'll be able to knock down shots. Just kind of seen as like the ultimate connector and role player. How do you think this SEC schedule could impact his draft status?
I think Alabama, because of that depth, is going to have every opportunity to tinker and find the right rotation. Now, is Chris Youngblood probably going to get more minutes than Derrion Reid when it matters most? Probably. However, in the games that Alabama's needed their athletes, and what I mean by that, the games where they've played against teams that impose their will, typically Houston, Texas A&M, Derrion Reid, and in another game, Diabate, showed up and showed their athletic mettle and their ability to get down a stance and guard multiple positions and just be valuable contributors on a college basketball floor, even without shooting the ball well, because they can move and do things that other people cannot, even in an uber athletic conference. Derrion Reid's stroke doesn't look bad. He's not shooting well. He's around 30%. And I think If he gets that up to 33%, and even if he doesn't, I still think I'd take a flyer on him in the first round. I just don't see many guys that move the way he does and have the basketball, I wouldn't say intelligence, but they don't get in the way. Like, he's not causing a logjam because he's not in the right spots. I don't think he's necessarily the innately gifted, oh my goodness, like his basketball IQ's through the roof, but he runs the floor. He goes to the right places. He cuts on time. He shoots the shots he should shoot. He just needs to make a couple more of them. And defensively, he's got me thinking, okay, we might get a late round steal here. And the other guy who feels that way to me and is a little different is Carter Bryant. I know that's not the SEC, but yeah. Carter Bryant, if he shoots well, that's his swing skill, but you don't get guys that are 6'9", 6'10", McDonald's All-Americans settling into a role early. So I probably will have both those guys in my 20s and maybe even higher as they hopefully improve throughout conference play.
Yep, I agree. All right, up next, we're going to talk about Asa Newell, and then we're going to go back to the guards, talk about Boogie Fland, and then I want to hear Leif's thoughts on Fland's teammate, Asa Newell. And let's talk about our new sponsor, which is Open Phone. If you are running a small business, it means you are wearing a lot of hats, and your personal phone becomes your business phone, and before you know it, you are juggling customer calls all day and night. And as your team grows, it literally becomes impossible. I'm speaking on this from firsthand. It literally becomes impossible to manage everything with just your personal number. And that's where Open Phone comes in. It is the #1 business phone system designed to help you keep your work and personal life separate. And for just $15 a month, a cost of a few coffees or a few Mountain Dews, you can get complete transparency and visibility into everything happening with your business phone number. And right now, Open Phone is offering 20% off your first 6 months when you go to openphone.com/lockedonnba. That is open, openphone.com/lockedonnba for $20 off for 6 months. Again, openphone.com/lockedonnba. All right, last segment. Let's talk about Asa Newell real fast. How do you think this SEC schedule can help or hurt his draft stock? I know for me, coming into the season, my concerns or questions I had were, how well is he going to shoot the ball? Well, is he a 5 in the NBA? Does he have the rim protection and rebounding to be a 5? Or is he going to show enough skill set to where you think he can be a 4? I don't know if those questions have been answered yet, to be totally honest with you. But I would say more so, I don't think he's a 4. I think he is a 5 in the NBA, but I have some concerns about the rebounding. Yes, he's great on the offensive glass, but on the defensive end, he's, pretty average rebounder and is not an elite rim protector by any means. But he's got an awesome motor. He's got an elite motor. He's a great play finisher and is an exciting athlete. So in your mind, how can this gauntlet of an SEC schedule help or expose him?
I was thinking about this when you texted me a couple days ago saying you wanted to talk about SEC scouting, and I was like, the guy who I think has the most to gain, but I think if I had to predict is going to lose in terms of his traction and trajectory is probably Asa Newell. Asa Newell is a guy who relies on athleticism more than anything else in his game, and then it's motor. And so if there's some guys who are unbelievable athletes that don't have motor, and you combine the two, and that's great. Like, you can make a really good carve out a really good career in an NBA just off those two traits. However, we're talking about the lottery, and he's got lottery production, but I don't think it lasts in the SEC because there's so many good athletes and there's bigger and older guys. So he's going to play the 4, which means he needs to hit threes because he plays next to Somto Surreal, who is a bear in the middle. He's just absolutely built and he battles people. So that makes Asa Newell, in my opinion, play out of position and take on like a Jared Vanderbilt role, like where he switches ends of the floor really fast, a springy guy, and he's defensively able to switch, but he's a little bit bigger. He's a better play finisher, but just that change of direction type of guy. And I think it probably goes poorly in the sense of his numbers won't be as good unless his volume goes up and then his efficiency would drop. But I do think there's a way that him playing so much 4 heightens his skill level for when he plays the 5, and people will imagine him as the 5 because it's how they'll be drafting him in the NBA. And I think that's an underrated thing because so often we get caught up in positionality. And an example we've talked about is Keontae George didn't look good playing the small forward at Baylor and putting on all this weight. And he goes to the point guard and the shooting guard, and he's more comfortable. So I think Asa Newell will drop a little bit because his productivity will drop in terms of the counting stats and efficiency. But I do think there's going to be some people that just love the heart, the hustle, along with the intangibles. He's been well coached at Montverde. He's playing a role nicely, seems kind of well adjusted to college ball. And then you have the athleticism to pair with that heart.
Yeah, I mean, so far he's been good. I mean, we can make a case and say out of all the freshmen, he's been the most consistent. Georgia has won 2 of their 3 SEC games. He had 13 points and 13 rebounds, which is, address my concerns for rebounding. He had a double-double against Ole Miss, against Kentucky, a game that they won. He had 17.7 rebounds, and he had a block and a steal. He was 5 of 9 from the floor, but more importantly, he made 2 of 5 from 3. And then against Oklahoma, he was 5 of 10 from the floor, made all 5 of his foul attempts, had 15 points and 5 rebounds. So you can make a case and say he's been the most consistent out of the guys that we've mentioned so far with his productivity in the SEC. All right, let's switch up to Arkansas. Arkansas is 0-3. And this is not an opportunity for you to pile on on Coach Cal, which I asked some Kentucky fans, just some friends of mine that are Kentucky fans who were like pro Coach Cal the whole time. They didn't want to see him go. And I'm like, how do you feel now with the way Kentucky's played? But anyway, with Arkansas, you have Boogie Fland and Adu Thero. And are there 2 guys that I think could be first-round picks this year? Coming into the season, I would have thought Zvonimir Ivisic was going to be in that range. But let's talk about Boogie Fland. He's had an absolutely brutal start to conference play. He's scoring 15 against Florida, 14 against Ole Miss, 12 against Tennessee, but here are the numbers. 5 of 15 versus Tennessee, 5 of 20 versus Ole Miss, 4 of 13 versus Florida. Will this SEC schedule bump him out of the first round, even if you have another first-round pick?
I think for both these Arkansas guys, it's going to be a battle of do their highs outweigh their lows? Because I think their average games are pedestrian enough that it doesn't change anyone. Like you could say, oh, he's consistently going to score, blah, blah, blah. And for Labaron Philon, you say as long as he's keeping up a steadfast level and it doesn't just plummet, then you're happy. And when you have those peaks, you're like, oh my goodness, this is what he could be when he has the ball in his hands. Whereas Boogie Fland has the ball in his hands. Boogie Fland gets to take whatever shot he wants. And that's actually the benefit of Calipari. I know I don't like Calipari, and I've often criticized him, and I think rightly so. But he gets the player the ball in his hands that needs the ball, and he's done it this year, and he's taken the ball out of DJ Wagner's hands, and it's been beneficial because Fland's better. But as for Thero, when Thero shoots badly, that's the exact thing that scouts want to see. So as long as he keeps a steadfast level and it doesn't plummet, that's fine, but it doesn't move anyone. So he just needs a lot of those loud games to outweigh the ones where he shoots, 12 of 21 from the free throw line, even in what was a great game. He shot horribly, and that's going to be ingrained in my mind and ingrained in a lot of people's minds. And defensively, he needs to play like he did when he was Kentucky's enforcer, even with this role, because that's what you're still drafting. You're still drafting this tremendous athlete who's now gained offensive skill set and now has gained confidence. So I think Thero is a first rounder. Boogie Fland, I also think, is a first rounder, but his inconsistency will be more criticized than I think Thero's, because Thero's got a big body and a frame that any NBA guy would desire.
Yeah, he does have some major concerns as a shooter. He's not a freshman, and usually if you're a freshman, they may look the shooting deficiencies, but he's actually percentage-wise gotten worse. The volume has increased significantly. I mean, it's more than tripled since his freshman year, but he's at 23% from 3. And the free throw percentage is at 67%, but a lot of that has to do with that game where I don't know what was going on in that game. It was against Illinois. Yeah, he was 12 of 21, not from the field, from the foul line. But I do think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, Fland is going to need some big moments because he's already struggled finishing at the rim. And then if the three ball stops falling, then I think it's going to definitely have a major impact on just his overall draft status. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast. Let us know your thoughts on how to evaluate these prospects in the SEC. I know we didn't cover all the top prospects, but I think it's going to be a very, very difficult eval for a lot of guys because they're going to have some really good performances, and they may have 3 or 4 games where they just absolutely don't look like first-round picks. And you could have 4 games in a row where you play 4 teams inside the top 15. So if you have any thoughts about some of the top prospects and how to evaluate in this tough SEC, let us know. Leave a message in the YouTube comments. Once again, it's Rafael, Barlowe, and Leif Thulin. Again, thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Check out the Locked On newsletter at lockedondaily.com, and we